Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Email Love Live. Today we have Des Brown. He is a director at Touchbase Pro, and he's based just outside of Cape Town, South Africa. Des, welcome.
Andy, nice to be here. It's always surreal seeing these live on LinkedIn and then being on one yourself. So thank you for the opportunity. I sincerely appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Love to have you. You have been a guest curator on emaillove.com. So we are going to dig into some of the emails that you added to the site. We're also going to just learn a little bit more about yourself and ask you a few questions around what you do and how you do it. So why don't we kick things off by just having you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at Touchbase Pro, and how did you originally get into the email marketing space?
Yeah, sure. So Touchbase Pro is an interesting one. We're one of very few ESPs in South Africa and Africa as a whole. And my official role is director, but I guess unofficially wear of many hats. You wind up in a company, in the space doing quite a bit more than just leading. There's the business growth aspect, there's the team management aspect, there's a lot of the marketing components as well. So yeah, we're one of those teams where everyone jumps in and applies their best skill set and sort of makes it work well. So it's almost 7 years I've been part of the
Oh,
organization.
wow.
So proverbially part of the furniture by now, and yeah, very entrenched in the email space because that's our focus as an ESP. But interestingly, got into it almost by accident. I previously worked for a classifieds organization, and they launched a digital component, and a big part of that digital component was email. So initially learning how to sell email, initially learning how the ropes of email worked, and sort of falling for email from there is kind of what's happened. And yeah, wound up applying for a role at Touchbase Pro, like I said, almost 7 years ago, and took on a business development management role. And from there, sort of grew into the space, taking over the GM role and eventually into the directorship as I've sort of been intertwining myself further and further in email. So that's been the journey on that front.
So you're working with customers primarily, are they all in Africa or are some of them in other parts of the world as well?
So look, our major focus is South Africa and Africa as a
Mm-hmm.
whole, but we do have quite a few European customers, and the reason for that is we share a time zone. So we're an
Mm-hmm.
ESP with a service component attached to it. We're heavily service focused as well. And being in that time zone, it makes sense. We can support companies well from there. We're able to work a little bit more hand in hand because we're not dealing with people that are 8 hours, before or after that, like yourself in San Fran. So it does make it a little bit easier. But we do have clients all over the globe. We've got clients in their self-service capacity in the US, in LATAM, in Australia. So it's a nice spread, but predominantly our focus lies in that sort of time zone around Africa and South Africa.
Got it. Got it. That makes sense. And you have another website, I guess a personal project or website called Email Expert Africa. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how did you start that?
So it started as a learning experiment, as a after hours, how can I learn more about the email space and where it's going, and turned into my little community that I've started kicking off and working on and growing. And it's centered around email advice in your inbox, which is the newsletter that I share every 2 weeks, that is designed to essentially act as an aid and guide to email senders. So
Mm-hmm.
sharing things that I've discovered that help me be a better email sender at the end of the day, or an email marketer, sharing resources and tools, and predominantly, things that are going to make an email sender's life better, and also sharing some stuff that happens in the email space because it's constantly changing all the time. So it's sort of evolved into this community project where I'm trying to grow a audience of like-minded email individuals, a space for people to share their knowledge, to be able to interact. And I'm building Email Expert Africa around that sort of community aspect. So it has some elements of knowledge sharing. I've got the blog going, but the idea here is to make it easy for people to learn about email from their inbox. So yeah, that's kind of where it's focused on, and that's kind of where it's going into 2025.
Can I ask you a question around your newsletter? How far before you send the newsletter do you write the content for it? Is it written like weeks in advance, or is it like the day before? I'm just interested for my own, because I'm like, you just reminded me. I need to write the email love newsletter for this week, and I have not started it yet. So I'm just wondering what other people do.
So I'm sure I share the sentiment with many other email senders, but it depends. And the reason I say it depends is it's the week it happens in, right? So like Black Friday week, I knew to prepare well before that because I was going to be chaotically busy in that week. But then there are other times where a circumstance happens and I'm writing, 3 days prior to send date. I'm a big fan of putting a hard line in the sand of going nothing 2 days before I send. And that's because I'm I got to practice what I preach, right? So test everything, make sure it works, and things will slip through the cracks. But I've got that hard deadline for myself. Nothing more than 2 days prior to sending is going to be created or written. It has to be ready. So I'll do some last minute composition and tweaks and changes and editing and testing. But yeah, that's kind of, I have to keep myself accountable to that. And so far I haven't let that deadline slip, but it's going to happen one day. I guess it happens to all of us, right?
Yeah, I definitely need to be more disciplined with. Cool. So what tools? What are your favorite email tools? What are you using or what? Maybe you're not you, but what is your team using to like design emails, build them? Obviously, you probably using your own tool to send. But I'm interested in kind of what's in the TouchBase Pro toolbox, and what do you guys really like to use?
Yeah, so I guess I'm a little biased in saying, TouchBase Pro is at the forefront of that being an ESP. We've got some solid relationships with some ESPs out there from a tech stack perspective. We've also got a component of ours that we've been working on over the last couple of years where it's our own proprietary tech. So we're doing some really cool stuff on the AI for email space. We're doing some really cool stuff on the personalization side of things and the segmentation side, again, using AI. So I'm kind of inclined to say that from an email perspective, TouchBase Pro is ticking all the boxes, but there are all these supporting tools as well. You can't do everything at once in one place. So for email sending, it's our platform, and it ticks all the right boxes for the type of email sender I am. There are also other tools. I mean, I can't live without Canva. I never thought I'd say those words, but Canva is, yes. From a management perspective, like I run the websites and the blog and all of those things off Wix. So I've learned how to build a site and put up my own SEO and all of that from all the stuff I've been learning, which has been pretty cool because I've as much as I've studied my marketing degree, this is stuff you find out while you're building.
Yeah.
So exactly. There's that as well. And then there are a couple of other, support tools. It sounds silly, and I'm not just blowing smoke here. Email Love comes up quite often for us.
Excellent.
From a service-based, being a service-based business as well, best way to get a client to give you their vision of what they want to execute on email if they're not sending prior, or if they have a new strategy, is to sit down and take them through email examples. And I mean, I'm plugging Email Love here, but it's probably the best place that we send folks to go find inspiration, and we'll help you build around that. So big focus there. From an AI perspective, I use Claude as my sort of soundboard. I'm not a big fan of using it to generate copy. I prefer to write copy myself, but to run ideas, to put together suggestions, to look at strategy, I'm a Claude user as opposed to a ChatGPT user. And there's a couple of other, ancillary tools. We're Microsoft Azure partners, so we use a lot of Microsoft Suite and their products as well in our business. And then there's also, a couple of other project management tools like Asana and a few of those, HubSpot from a CRM perspective. So many things that get intertwined in our day to day. So yeah, quite a few. And then LinkedIn, I spend a big portion of my life on LinkedIn. Around 15,000 odd followers there too. So I've got to keep that well polished and keep adding value. So I do spend a lot of time there as well.
Yeah, I think you do some great posts and content.
I try.
So, it's interesting because I've just discovered Claude, and I actually way prefer it over ChatGPT. I'm actually surprised at how good it is.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
if you saw the email of wrapped like animation that I posted the other day,
yes.
but that was made with Claude. I just uploaded like anonymous like website data, and then I
Oh
told it to
wow,
make a wrapped style like animation, and it did everything for me. It was amazing.
it
And
was
ChatGPT would
pretty.
not do that. Like I don't think ChatGPT could do that, right?
No, I've pushed the limits in ChatGPT using the spreadsheets and trying to create images that just the general AI, unless it's extremely prompted, is going to create. And I found it far more limited than Claude. So I mean, kudos to the guys behind it. But I'm finding it far more helpful. So I need to try the image generation stuff. I used Dolly and Canva's Create for most of my
Yeah.
images
The problem with those
prior.
is that it looks like AI, right? Like it just looks like you can tell that it was generated by DALL-E
Exactly.
or one of those products, right?
Exactly. So I'm gonna give Claude's AI image generation a try. Why not?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Uh, you were talking about Touchbase Pro using AI. Can you talk about what you guys are doing there? I'm interested in how you're using it and what it's being used for, and actually more broadly, where do you see AI taking the email marketing space in the future? Like I'm interested in how you think AI is going to impact the email marketing function as it becomes more advanced. Like, are we going to see people lose their jobs because of AI, or what do you see happening there?
So it's an interesting one because this question it comes up often, and I think it's the biggest worry around AI. Are people
Mm-hmm.
going to lose their jobs? And I think, as with the introduction of any technology, I saw a post explaining how the introduction of the calculator was this world-shaking event for teachers, and how we've just adapted education around it, a calculator, and something as simple as that. So I think, and to start with this point, I think the world is going to adapt around AI, or adapt to the way that it functions, and jobs are going to be created out of that in itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, and I don't think for a long time, unless we reach some form of sentient AI ability, I don't feel that it's going to be this all consuming, automate everything type world that we envision. There is still going to be a ton of needs that need to be fulfilled by humans and human thinking brains. So in the email space, it's quite an intriguing one because we're seeing the emergence of quite a lot of predominantly content generation tools. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to create an email to do this. You're essentially inserting the copy based on an LLM generating that. You're inserting images that are potentially based off prompts. You're inserting that into templates that are set up in an AI engine. Um, but beyond that, it becomes really difficult to go, how do I make this my own? And I think that's where email marketers are going to stand out, because AI is essentially regurgitating a mix of content that already exists.
Mm-hmm.
We're inventing that. We're inventing that. So there's always going to be that need. And especially in an inbox where inboxes are becoming crowded, it's going to need that human ability to go, I want to do things a little bit differently. What is the strategy? What's the plan? What's the broader thinking? And how can I encompass everything about my business or my brand into that, so that it stands out? And that's going to be impactful. So look, we're seeing some interesting stuff. iOS 18's AI summaries are going to be intriguing because they're going to change the game for things like the strategy behind subject lines and pre-header view texts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the way that copy is structured. I'm intrigued to see how AI summaries are going to render with purely image-based emails. How is alt text going to become a strategy to be
Mm-hmm.
able to inform what gets read on that AI summary? And there's a whole bunch of different things that are happening in the background. But what we've done at Touchbase Pro is looked at what are the most impactful points that AI can essentially work with in the email game. And we've got, the copy generation LLM based tools. We've got the image generation tools and editing, which are good. But where it gets really cool is the content clustering and segmentation of audiences, and the way that we feed content into the email sphere based on an AI engine. So essentially what we do is we predominantly work with publishers in the space. We look at what publishers are doing when visitors or readers are attending their websites. Once that reader logs into that environment to consume that content, what we're doing is we're learning using the AI engine, what this person prefers, what they enjoy, their authors, their journalists, the type of content, the segments of that content. And we're clustering these so that we can create almost an email of one that suits every individual reader. So based on the clusters, we're including content around what you enjoy through the data feed between the system and the website. And at the same time, we're omitting content based on what you've already consumed so that there's not a repetition of it, and then suggesting further content or reading based on what you're consuming as an ongoing learning process. And we're using AI to inform the content. We're using AI to inform the segmentation criteria. And we're using AI to then also look at things like potentially predicting future behavior. Is this person going to disengage based on certain elements? Is this person going to, continue engaging, and trying to predict that in the algorithm is what we're looking to do as well. So there's also optimizing things like sending times, but that can be done mathematically. So looking at averages and sending in accordance with that. And there's a few other elements as well. But I think where AI becomes most powerful in the email space is from a content sort of curation perspective. Are we curating content that appeals to that specific audience member? Why they're opening these emails? Why are they staying engaged? And how can we enhance that engagement? That's where AI is going to aid us most. So if we understand audiences better and serve them content better, we're going to win the relationship. And AI is probably the best tool right now to be able to do that. So that's where we put our focus. There are a couple of other small things we're doing in the background, but that's the big one, is to go, how do we send relevant content to a specific individual that feels like they're the only person reading that email? Very often they are. So that's kind of the focus of where we're going with that.
That's super cool. And are customers using this now, or is this like a beta product, or?
Nope, there are customers using it already. And that's the great part. We've spent probably the last 2-3 years building this component to the platform, and publishers are already seeing results. It started with publishers because we set up the parameters around journalists and types of content, but that's going to expand, and we're already looking at taking it into the e-commerce space. We're looking at taking it into other spaces. Yeah. So you can see the relevance of how that fits from product recommendations to the way that people are interacting and engaging with emails and sending them relevant content. There's a lot of where it can go. And then, and this is where we envision this going, and what we're currently building is where it goes into the omni-channel environment. So transactionally, how are we creating engagement points on things like SMS and WhatsApp? Those are big ones for us because, and here's an interesting stat, 92% of South African internet users are on WhatsApp. It's absolutely massive.
Almost everyone is on WhatsApp.
Almost everyone.
WhatsApp's like huge in Africa in general?
In Africa, it's probably the biggest channel, if I had to think about it, across most African regions. And it's just seen such massive growth because it's low barrier to entry. You don't need a lot of data to communicate. It's easy to use, and it's pretty trusted, which is quite interesting as well. I guess people here care less about the encryption of messages and all of that, even though Meta does have strict sort of protocols around it. But again, there's a lot of usage here. So we're going as an extension of email. How do we tie in these other channels to create an environment where you can communicate with someone well in their preferred channel, but keep the support of the other channels in place at the same time? So,
got it.
Yeah.
And your customers are doing marketing through WhatsApp, like they're sending like a SMS marketing message through WhatsApp. Because I personally I do get WhatsApp messages from like Bitcoin people who are like they'll like randomly add me to like a group on WhatsApp, and it'll be some kind of crypto thing. Is like the extent of what I receive in the US. I don't get many like brands marketing to me on WhatsApp.
Yeah, it's an intriguing one. As with email, there's a very strict opt-in and compliance process. So consent is big, especially for Meta. And what you send to your audience in the outbound sense also needs to be approved. So every time you send something, a template needs to be approved by Meta and the content they're in. So they're very strict, and there's a whole process that you go through to send outbound messaging. There's also the transactional component that's been pretty big. So airlines locally have been using it, medical aids or insurance have been using it. And the way that they use it is when you have a flight book, there'll be an outbound message saying, here's that information, here's what you need to know. As soon as your boarding gate opens, they'll send another WhatsApp. Or in the insurance space, here's where your claim is at. Here's how you're progressing. Here's updates on your policy. So the transactional side is doing really well because that it makes a lot of sense. And you can add a lot more to it than you can to an SMS, as an example. But then there's also the chat component, because it's far more interactive from a chat perspective. There's a lot of focus on creating channeled communication with call centers, with support teams, with a whole bunch of elements where bulk email, essentially, you're communicating back within a single individual. We're able to route different WhatsApp chats to different functions within an organization based on what the person wants. And that's where the real power comes in, because email is great as an outbound tool, and it can create that, reciprocation of communication, but it's not as channeled. You can respond to one individual in an email, whereas in WhatsApp, if I want support, or if I want sales, or if I want whatever else it may be, I can direct the conversation to that department and deal with that specific person. It's not just a single email responder that I have to deal with. So a lot of opportunity there. We're trying to leverage that as we grow, and I think AI into the WhatsApp space is something that's coming with Meta's focus on AI as well. So I'm very intrigued to see where that goes as well.
That's really interesting. I feel like in the US it's not being used in that way yet. It sounds a little bit like SMS. SMS is I think, doing a lot of what you described over here. But obviously, you're right. It's not as powerful as WhatsApp, and there's definitely less functionality there.
Cool. We've also on the SMS side, and maybe just an end note to this, there's a lot of mistrust with SMS locally. Those really? Bitcoin scams that you would get on WhatsApp, we're getting those on SMS. And that's potentially why WhatsApp is seen as a little bit more trusted, because you can validate that a brand is authentic. It's not being sent in a WhatsApp like group chat, or it's not being sent as a broadcast message from a single individual. It is a validated business sending these communications. So a lot more trust. You're not just clicking a random Bitly link and hoping that you're not getting yourself fished. But that's why I think it carries a lot more efficacy than SMS locally. Even though SMS is big, we've still got a big contingent of people that don't have internet access, so SMS works well for them. But at the end of the day, I think WhatsApp just has that additional trust element to it. So, I'm very intrigued to see where it goes.
Very cool. Okay, so before we jump into your curated gallery, last question. What are your thoughts on interactive email? Is this something that you're doing at Touchbase Pro? Is the juice worth the squeeze when it comes to interactive carousels and interactive AMP elements? What's your experience with that? Have you seen any success, or have you tried it out with any customers?
So we haven't personally gone after or espoused interactive email, simply because of the limitations within a lot of the inboxes still. There are so many different nuances just to an Outlook inbox based on the version you're looking at, or based on the device you're using. Should our focus be there, or should our focus be on advising clients to create strong email strategies that can lead to the same results, just using effective mechanisms in email? And we've decided to put our focus there, as opposed to just switching our platforms to interactive platforms. And the reason for that, I think, predominantly is education. Many folks and customers don't understand the fact that not all emails are going to be rendered in the inbox equally. And I think that's the biggest thing. If you're creating an email and you're then creating AMP elements within an email, there's a lot of potential for things to break. There's a lot of potential for people to get confused or get it wrong. So we've gone, let us aid you in doing email well until AMP is fully accepted everywhere, and then we roll it out as a standard. There's a lot that can be done from a survey perspective, from an interactive sort of visual perspective. I'm a big fan of interactive emails. But at the end of the day, and this is where the big caveat comes in, is it practical for the average email sender out there? And most of the time the answer is no. And that's where putting a focus on, what should you be doing as opposed to what you can do is where we've made that decision to go, we should be focusing on this, even though we can do that. And that's why we've taken the hard line to go, when it gains traction, we'll potentially look at adding it further. But until then, we want people to send good emails and be consistent in that. So that's why we put up effort there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also wonder from an end user perspective if they understand how to even use some of these interactive elements. Because obviously it's not common. Not every email has an interactive element to it. And so I also sometimes wonder if the subscriber actually knows that it's interactive, or knows to click on this button to open this up and do something else.
Yeah.
I think that's hard. It's hard to measure, and it's hard to figure out what the impact is.
Yeah, I mean, you had Aquabar from Mailmotor on the other day, and their focus on interactive email is massive, and they're doing some amazing things in the space. If you're part of their newsletter and you see just how they're constructed, phenomenal. And there are so many cool bells and whistles that you as an email sender go, geez, I really want to do this. But when you put that in the hands of someone who is a general marketer, someone who focuses on not just email, but all the other facets, which is a big portion of who we work with, should we be taking their focus away from the core vitals that make email work? Getting to the inbox well, keeping a good engagement strategy going, making sure that things look good and are functional, or do we put their attention on the sort of I guess the shiny stuff, the things that are capturing attention because they look cool? It's taking that balance and trying to figure it out. There are certain senders where I think in the next year or so, we'll start helping them from a code perspective understand the way that AMP for email works, or the way that interactive emails work. But until then, the majority of our senders need to get the basics right first to just remain at the top of the inbox. So that's kind of the
good point.
Kind of focus. Yeah,
I totally agree. There's definitely just getting the basics right is something that most people need to focus on, I think, first.
Yeah.
All right. So we have like 3 minutes to check out your curated gallery. I'd like to understand, how did you pick your emails to feature on Email Love, Des? Because you got some pretty interesting designs here. I'm just interested in kind of the thought process behind this this collection here.
So I went against my instinct of going, let me find emails that adhere to good structures well, and I went for some crazy stuff in there too. But I used the baseline of what do I subscribe to and what do I read, and that's kind of how I stuck to these. I mean, I see very few record labels sending good emails. I know in June Deep and the crowd. Yeah, you know this.
Like I subscribe to like Linkin Park, and I'm like, I want to feature a Linkin Park email, but like they're not there yet. I did love this one. This is a good one.
Yeah, so the striking intro image. They've got a good image to text balance. Things read well and they're visually appealing. So I'm a sucker for an email that's just broken up really well and has good visuals. So this one was one that stuck. And even though it is quite text heavy, I mean, it serves a function as a good newsletter. So I thought, hey, there's a couple of animated GIFs. There's some good images. Let me share this one. So I thought a good example to showcase that record labels can send good emails. And I'd like to see more of those if there are any record labels listening. And there were a couple of others.
Above and Beyond. I think this was a good one as well, and I think we're both fans of these guys actually, which was funny. I saw this and I was like, oh, I need to subscribe to their newsletter. Like, this is awesome animation actually. Like, I think bands and musicians, they have a big opportunity to feature like this kind of content in their newsletter, right? Like, and you don't see it that often.
No, that's the thing with the strategy around, the type of music that they make. You want someone to feel something. How do you make someone feel something? You put them in the middle of that concert. How do you do that in an email? I mean, an animated GIF like that, just give some highlights, show the feeling. Amazing. So I think GIFs and micro animations for email senders in the music space, hey, why not?
Big opportunity there. For
massive opportunity.
That's super cool. The other one I actually loved was this Yotpo example. Like this is a newsletter from Yotpo, which is a SaaS product, kind of in the marketing space. I think they do they do some email, they do SMS, and I think they do reviews. Super striking newsletter, I thought. Very
different. One of my favorites, and the way that they use colors. They share a couple of really cool emails inside of these emails. So I'm always a fan of the different layers of email in email. But yeah, I mean the rounded sort of button edges and the images. I follow that in my newsletter as well. The way that the content's broken up really nicely. They use their white space. So it's really cool, and it gives a nice, sectioned approach to the way that you consume it. It's not just this blank wall of text. So their colors work. I think the readability and the accessibility behind the colors work really well. And yeah, you can see they're in the email game. They send really good emails.
I might have to steal this type of animation for my newsletter. Just showing an animation of what the email looks like is actually a really good idea. I might borrow that. Right?
Works super well.
Yeah. Here's another one actually. Yeah, I'm definitely going to steal that. What else was in here? Actually, there's some really cool South African brands in here. Actually, I think this was a South African property company.
Yeah.
This was super cool actually. Charlie and the Chairman.
Charlie and the Chairman, yes. The colors are fantastic, and also again, you can see I'm a fan of a good animated GIF, and they nailed this one. They've got a ton of information in a really concise, striking way. They've walked you through the process well, and I wanted to showcase that there are really talented South African email senders. We kind of get forgotten being at the bottom foot of Africa. And there are some phenomenal emails in the space. So I included a few in the collection. This was one of those that stood out really well. Their colors, the way that they've laid it out. And this was a launch day mail. I think I should have included one or two of those prior to launch. So there's a ton of property investment happening, especially in cities like Cape Town. So they're putting together these really appealing campaigns and mock-up ideas of how these things are going to look. Email's such a great place to go and show that. And on launch day, how to build hype and how to get someone to, visit the reservation side of things. How better?
Yeah, very, very cool example. All right, Des. Well, we don't have time to visit anymore. If you want to check out the rest of Des's collection, you can just go to the inspiration drop down here. You can find the Des emoji, and that will take you to his collection. All right. Well, thank you, Des. This was great. This was awesome to meet you and chat with you. I've been following you online for a long time, and so it's awesome to meet in person. And I hope that we can do this again sometime.
It's definitely run it back, Andy. Thank you, and an absolute pleasure, an absolute privilege. And yeah, I hope you and everyone listening has a good end to the year ahead. I think we've only got something like, 20 days left in the year. So yeah, we're nearly 2025. So thank you again.
All right. Thanks, Des. See ya.